So I think what falls out of this, here we go. What falls out of this is pretty clear as far as big guiding principles. I think that if we are not harnessing this testing effect or retrieval effect, we're missing out, frankly. I mean, this doesn't mean that quizzes have to look a certain way or even be called quizzes or tests. Remember, it's the retrieving. It's that active, hey, I got to drag this out of memory, and was I right or was I wrong? That's the core of it. All the rest can look a lot of different ways and still be effective. And I think this is one of the big promises of online education and all kinds of educational technology in general. As we were talking about over the break, we've known about this effect for years and years. But we lacked effective ways to use that to help students practice foundational information in a way that's going to be efficient for them. And I mean, if you doubt that principle, I mean, you can observe this in daily life starting today. Like the numbers on the back of your credit card, the 3 little numbers that you always need to type in to order the cool thing from Amazon or wherever, I don't know how many of you know those or whether you're racing for the credit card every time. And they're designed to do that, to make you actually physically take the thing and flip it over. If you want to remember those numbers, don't flip it over next time. Try to type them in, see if you can get there, and then see if you're right or wrong. And that will advance you so much farther than 50 different times of pulling it out of your wallet, looking at it again, and then typing it in. So the testing effect retrieval practice, that's a really big one. But I do think that how you frame them in the course is important, especially as you brought up that unfortunately we are building on what has become, I think, also a very dysfunctional culture of testing in K through 12, right? They came out of that environment. We all know it. And that's not what we're talking about here, like let's just assess everything to death for other purposes. This is saying, you know what, why would I give you a quiz when you haven't read the chapter a bunch of times, or maybe even before you've read this chapter? Why would I do such a thing? Well, I'm not interested in your grade per se. I'm interested in that being a good opportunity for you to learn the stuff, the foundational stuff that we do want you to know. And once you bring that barrier down with students, they can be really quick about saying, oh, okay, now I get it. And it can look lots of different ways, as we'll revisit in a little bit with some more detail. So harnessing the testing effect, are we doing that? And is it more explicit to students why it looks the way it does? Bringing the spacing effect in as well. And here I think this is actually kind of good news for our students who have the 2 jobs and the family and the kids and the full course load. We know who those students are. So you don't have to have the 8 hours on a Sunday to spend in the library. In fact, you're going to get more out of that time if you, for example, put the quizzing app on your phone or your reading on your phone and you take a look at it or work with it while you're waiting for your kids at soccer practice or you're at the bus. That actually, those small bites learning is effective. And using the technology to structure deadlines and structure engagement with the material in more pieced out fashion. And here I know too we can get pushback on that as well. Some students like to have the one deadline in a week when everything comes in. But there really is a justification of saying, no, I want you to do these 2 chapter quizzes spaced out, and then I want you to engage in this discussion forum on a different day. You can. I always let students work ahead if they want to. I don't force them into that. But I make sure there are enough nudges in the way the course is designed to where we're looking at this stuff more frequently, not less frequently. And then all those powerful processes. Of course, depth of processing. Of course, we're always asking students to relate things to themselves, to their own lives, to contextualize. But also making sure we're not missing out on visuals. And this is another thing where, the promise of educational technology is huge, to have the multimedia that's really well designed and shows the concepts in these visual ways. It's one where I am oftentimes editorializing a little bit because I think our publishers and the people who have the power to create that really good multimedia are not always stepping up the way they should. So I'll put that out to you as kind of a call to action, that if you're not getting this kind of multimedia from the publishers and your ed tech companies, to lean on them as much as possible. Now, we know from research on how these materials work, and if you love this stuff, I would encourage you to really get into that research on multimedia. We know from that just decorating your stuff with graphics doesn't work and can actually hurt. So like if I'm teaching, if I've got an online module on how lightning forms, that doesn't mean I should have a picture of a person getting struck by lightning or a really cool lightning storm unfolding over Tucson or something like that. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about something like an animation that shows the processes unfolding in sequence, or even something that students can interact with, just to click on it and say, hey, this happened, what happens next? Those are the kinds of multimedia that are going to be really powerful and take advantage of that visual orientation that most of us do have. So three take-homes. All right. So let's transition now to a little bit more details, more examples that tie into some of those foundational concepts. Now, as I alluded to a little while ago, this idea of dysfunctional multitasking, and this being something that does plague our students in face-to-face classrooms, but also it's got to be something they think about in online learning contexts. I really think that it's sort of a contemporary life skill to be able to understand your attentional limitations and build some good behaviors and, frankly, habits in that help you manage what is a very distracting set of technologies we have available to us now. And when we put students online, we're asking them to go into a browser and go into a world that's designed to have you spirited away in a click. And I'll give you a little bit more backing for this claim in a minute, but I don't think this is a millennial issue. It's not a so-called digital native issue. This is kind of the human condition, right? We aren't very good judges of our own attentional limitations, and we are now at the mercy of a lot of commercial technologies that are built to do just that. And of course, if you doubt this for an instant, I mean, go to the back of a room at a conference with faculty, right? I know I've been at a lot of them where we're very earnestly talking about students not being focused and we're on email. So it happens. So to take a new way of tackling this, an instructional designer, John Doherty, and I, he's a brilliant person who comes out of English. Actually, that's what his degree is in. He and I worked together to create a freestanding module that just spreads awareness about this. And this was kind of a passion project for us. We didn't have any support to do this. We didn't have a grant. We wanted to see if we could get it built and crossed our fingers that anybody would ever be interested in it, which they definitely have been. So this exists as an open educational resource, and you're welcome to write to us, and we can send you different pieces of it, and you can use as much or as little of it as you like. And it finally is coming out it finally just came out in its first publication. This is a free ebook that you can download too. It talks about this project more from a psychology instruction perspective, but it still describes it and tells you a little bit about how it's structured and why. So we set this up. It works we use BB Learn. So it's an open module that any student or any staff as well at our institution can just click on and self-enroll. So open entry, open exit. And we do have about 70% of the people who come in actually stick it through and finish it. And given that it works a little bit like a MOOC, right, that's not too bad. So why do students do this? Well, we were betting on that faculty would be willing to assign this as extra credit in their classes. That they, were fired up about this, but said, I don't want to, I'm not a psychologist, or I don't want to spend a day in class talking about distraction or learning strategies. What can I do? So we don't ask, but we do believe that a lot of our faculty are offering this because we're now seeing anywhere from 300 to 500 students come through this module every single semester. And it's been running for a couple of years. So we're finally starting to see a few of some of the data that's come out of this project that I'm going to share with you in a second. So how does attention matters work? So I say this is sort of a self-enroll course. We call it a module, but it's a self-enroll course in BB Learn. And the idea here is, I know you can't see the text on this. This is just so you can see the front page and get a sense of how this looks and how it's structured. And I'll show you the structure broken down in another way in a second. So we set this up in a very linear way. Students come in, they see some information about topics such as attention or distraction, read that over, and then we pivoted right to videos, demonstrations, things that students can do at home, and then come back and discuss. So students come back and discuss. There's activities, videos, or other things that get the point across. We didn't want to be assigning research articles, obviously not a textbook in 1 or 2 hours, and we really wanted to stay away from that kind of, that cell phone is going to rot your brain and I'm the grown-up telling you sort of approach. You wanted students to discover some of these principles on their own. And again, these are things that I think can be adapted to either face-to-face or brought in piecemeal, even in lots of online courses we do, if that's something you're interested in talking about with your students. So this breaks down into 3 pieces. The first one just saying, well, introducing some concepts in attentional limitations. You can see here, this is the opener to a great video called The Amazing Color Changing Card Trick. That is linked into the website that I told you about at the top of the morning. And hopefully some of you will take a look at that. I'm not going to tell you anything else about it, but it is has to be seen to be believed. And our students really get into this video. They're amazed by it, and they love to talk about it in the discussion forum. So we start with that. What do you know about attention? We have the second piece, which talks about what does happen when we overload attention, especially in learning contexts. We also take the opportunity to introduce some important things like the testing effect, because I believe those things are related. So when students understand that just sort of being in front of a screen or being in a face-to-face classroom isn't enough to make material kind of stick, it makes a lot more sense when we tell them about things like self-quizzing. And that's a new principle for many of them as well, that hey, sitting down and quizzing myself is a really great way to study, actually with the book closed. So we talk about those principles too. And then in the last piece of it, we have, of course, a wrap-up, and we try to give them some strategies. Because as we know with so many aspects of behavior change, it's one thing to know, hey, here's why I should change my behavior. Here's why I should turn my phone off and have it in my backpack, or not have the videos while I'm in my online class. Here's why I should do it. It's another thing to make that happen when the class is getting slow, or you're having a hard day, or you're really, really tempted. So we tell them just a little bit about how to set up a behavioral plan, and we also have a very lively discussion thread in that part of it as well, where students share their own challenges and things that they've come up with. And they've come up with things that we have never even thought to suggest. So we've learned a lot about how they cope with this stuff as well. So that's what we do.
Is that video link live?
Should be.
On yours?
Oh, on mine, no. No. Yeah, it has audio.
Yeah, I've seen it, and I was hoping you could show it.
Okay, well maybe when we start up tomorrow with a little bit of lead time, having good audio at the same time as we have the video is always a technological challenge. But thank you for the request. I was wondering. I was thinking I might do that. Yeah.
Is it similar to the basketball passing early video?
It's similar but not identical. Those show, well, they show 2 related but very distinct phenomena, and we do have that video linked in. One of the differences between those 2 phenomena is that the basketball video is a one-shot deal. If you've ever seen it before, it will never work again. Even a different video showing more or less the same thing will be very hard to pull off. The other one is more robust and will hold up across different videos and different demonstrations. So that's why we actually didn't start with that one, although it is an optional one. And yeah, students will look at it and they'll either say, oh yeah, I saw that one, and they can move on, or they'll say, oh, what is that? And then that's another thing they can do and discuss. Yeah,
Michelle?
so that's the philosophy. Yep.
I'm interested in the 1 to 2 hour module, just period.
Yeah.
Now it's just available for North Arizona State,
Yeah.
Arizona University.
Yeah.
So,
It is, although we share this. I don't post the whole thing online. I kind of like to hand it out, and kind of know where it's going. But I've probably had 20, 25 different institutions at this point requested. And I mean, again, this is a totally sort of outlaw project that we just run as we're able to. So, but I have a folder set up that I can share. We have it, I know that it was also turned into a Canvas module by another institution, which I can share on request too. So they set it up. We have it in BB Learn, not every, so people who have that LMS can open it up. But I've also turned it all into Microsoft Word files that have the same content. So it's intended to be shareable.
yeah, I'd really like to just go
good.
through it and
Yeah.
see what we could manage.
Yeah.
What would be really useful, because I
Yeah.
think that's a huge issue with
Yeah.
students,
It
these
really
issues
is.
that you're raising.
Yeah. And a lot of institutions for a long time now have had these sort of, it's not quite a class, it's not quite a website, it's these chunkable kind of modules that students can do. Like we have one on academic dishonesty, there's others on research in the library. And I think that's good, but I think more of us do need to be thinking, yeah, even if it's not about attention, but what are some hot issues that can be pieced out into this not quite a course, not quite a website format. And once you get faculty on board, because that's how it gets to the students, is when you get faculty on board, whether it's extra credit or working into courses, that faculty are quite ingenious about getting students to do things once they believe in the value. And yeah, I think that's another definite moral to the story of Attention Matters is, hey, this format, this way of just getting to students about one thing in a small amount of time, it can be done because we're doing it every day. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, the thing is, I see my kids playing
Yeah.
with Minecraft for 8 hours. And
Yeah.
you cannot get their attention because the
Yeah.
iPad has their attention. So it's related to what is this interesting
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
So our students are not interested
Yeah.
in the content that we
Yeah.
teach sometimes.
Sometimes. And
Sometimes, so, I mean,
yeah.
we teach undergraduate students, so and we teach foreign language, so it's a requirement for most of them.
That's right.
So
And it's going to be hard. And I'll put a pin in it to revisit that with motivation as well, because I think, yeah, that there's some aspects of how motivation works. There's an immediate motivation versus there's a reason why you're in Spanish and not just so you can get your degree.
because when I learned
Yeah.
how to teach or
Yeah.
they were my education was in Spain where teaching a foreign language was a business.
Mm.
So it was our responsibility
Yeah.
to get the client and to keep the client and maintain the
Huh.
client. So if the student quit the class,
Yep.
it was our fault because we didn't engage the student.
Mhm.
So it's a different scenario.
Different culture, and
Yeah.
it's a hot potato, but in some institutions the culture is a lot closer to what you're describing.
When I came here, for me it was
Yeah.
kind of shocking how we put all the responsibility or the fault on the students.
Uh-huh.
They don't study, they don't do what they have to do.
Yeah.
Are we doing what is best to get that motivation? Are we?
Yeah, yeah. And so I would propose maybe a shared responsibility model. And I would say that, again, from reading what students have to say as they engage with these different videos and kind of fun and games activities, but what they have to say to each other in these discussion forums, it does paint a more complex picture than just we're forcing them to do something that they don't, that they think is boring and technology is more interesting. Students know, even our younger students, clearly they know, they've thought about it. Many of them are very ambivalent about the whole role of technology in their lives, which, again, we may have a kind of a one-dimensional view of the young students with their tech, when in fact they're saying, you know, it really does take away from this. Or I've had a few students relate to me just in different contexts. They'll say, you know what, I once got grounded and my phone got taken away for 3 days, and I was actually really relieved. It was really cool. But at the same time, they're using it. So I was really surprised and heartened by how much they know and how much they've reflected on it. And this is another opportunity for reflection. Again, while I really want them to come away with some kind of a plan, and I really don't want them to be doing like what one of my students did a long time ago, choose to watch the entire season of The Bachelorette during Psych 101. I was told about this by another student after the fact. It's like, oh, horrible. I don't want them to do that, but it is still their choice, and I still think that I'm going to lead you to water, and you can make your choice about whether to drink situation. But yeah, the complexities of motivation only accentuated by all the different things that students can be doing now. Yeah. So, yep.
Perhaps UTLC would be willing to look into getting this actual course ported over to something we can use here at UNCG. Would that be excellent? Thank
Okay,
you.
good. We're on the list. Good. And we do have another publication that, you know, as long as if there's internet on my next flight, that sucker's going to the journal. So we'll see. But one of the things that we put together for this, again, this is not so much about the text, but to give you a sense of just how we sequenced and structured this, starting with, like I said, here's an introduction. This will be relevant in a second. We start too with this, those two little question marks with surveys that we ask students. And you know, it's an assessment to see coming in, what are your beliefs? What do you think is true about memory and attention? And then we have these alternations of videos, activities, that's the little gear in the head, explanations. I wrote just very colloquial, hey, what was that about? No, tried to really not use any technical jargon or anything, but just give them the bare facts. And then definitely discussion and engagement. And see the certificate at the end too. If you do this, here's something very important too. So let's say maybe this takes off among your faculty and they really do want to assign this. Well, students are going to have this now showing up across multiple courses. They need a certificate. So it was a good opportunity for us to also start flowing out into our culture this idea that, yeah, certificate of completion, badging, whatever you want to call it, it's a portable credential that students can take. Now, the other big question, if when you implement this, and this is discussed a little bit in that chapter I told you about, is who runs this? Well, I babysit this thing. I very lightly moderate the discussions. It is a lot like a MOOC in that sense. There's not, a huge amount of back and forth or reflection. They can always get in touch with me if they're dying to talk about this stuff. But it's more a quick shot engagement. Go in, do it. Let's see what, it's in the doing of it, not so much in the back and forth or formality of it. So that's how it runs. It's not a part of my teaching load, but it is part of my research agenda, so it helps me there as well. So you do have to have somebody who does it. I have the very occasional tech supporty kind of thing. Oh, hey, the student said they finished it. Did they really? That I field. But mostly it's just in watching those discussions. So that's really what you're in for if you try to do something like this. So that's how the thing works. What have we learned so far? So I said there's this pre-assessment. This is also giving us generating responses to what is a survey. It's a questionnaire scale that I put together to ask people about those beliefs. And I eventually settled on the term counterproductive beliefs survey. I originally called it attention myths, but that was probably too strong. Some of these beliefs may technically be true, but I would argue that if you hold this belief, you are more likely to make those dysfunctional choices. And so there's a couple of different subsets of them. There were a set that had to do specifically with memory. So the idea that we pick things up by osmosis or passively, or rereading is a good way to remember, all those kinds of beliefs. There's some that do specifically relate to attention and attentional limitations, and how easy or effective is multitasking. And then, very similarly, we have a set on what I called self-exceptionalism. So other people can't learn while they text and watch 5 cat videos, but I can because I'm special. And that's something that also comes out of this great book, The Invisible Gorilla, and Chabries and Simon's great work on this. They say these are things that people tend to come to this with that are arguably mistaken or at least counterproductive beliefs. So it is true, for example, some people are better at multitasking than others. It doesn't break down along gender lines or age lines necessarily. It's just that seems to be the fact of the matter. But again, assuming that you're one of those people is probably not in your best interest. So here's just some examples of those. So keep in mind that students are completing this as they come in. And what an interesting way to look at the evolution and the relationships among some of these beliefs. So here's a couple of the things that I've learned so far just from doing this. I also sent this counterproductive belief survey to what I called a worldwide community sample through Amazon's kind of micro surveying, micro task platform. So we have, a decent group from around the world, non-college adults, also did the same survey. Oddly enough, or unexpectedly enough, when we looked at their counterproductive beliefs, they're actually slightly worse in that adult non-college sample than our NEU students. So yeah, some backing for the idea that it's not just students who believe this stuff. So our students were a little bit better, not wildly better. There was still a lot of room for addressing them. And we did find, we also found that there's a relationship between particularly one subset of those items, the ones relating to attention, and self-reported multitasking behavior. So we asked that of the community sample too. Now, I'm not seeing whether people actually are driving and texting or doing non-related email at work or some of these other multitasking behaviors, but these self-reports were correlated with those beliefs, which also gives some weight to the idea that these beliefs are important or possibly predictive of what we actually do. And yes, fortunately, as predicted, students do better. They're less accepting of these beliefs when they take that survey after they've done the module compared to before. So we don't do it as pre-test, post-test because it's kind of too obvious to students what we're looking for. It is a short module. But we have tried randomly varying whether they take this before or after. And yes, we do see good improvements. So for those who are data-minded, I'll just put this one in. This does seem to be true across the board of all those different kinds of items. So regardless of whether it's memory, attention, or self-exceptionalism, there's a good solid improvement in those before and after the module. So at least with respect to beliefs, we seem to see some positive progress. We'll have to tackle later on in this project the actual classroom behaviors and if it has any impact on things like GPA. But this is a start, at least. All right, so attention matters. That's one way we can actually, even in a fully online format, start to get to these things. So any other comments about your view on the importance of this issue or this way of addressing it? I think we've had some feedback on this already, but this is a more open the floor on what you think about this.
In our classes, we don't allow students to have any kind of electronic devices.
Yeah.
And so that's why they have to buy the textbook. We have a big concern about the price of the textbooks. So I was thinking, why shouldn't we let the students use the ebook in the class with the computer?
And then the computer's open.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So now
yeah.
I don't know what to do.
Well, okay, well maybe this, not to be too salesy about it, but yeah, maybe this is a way, since they're going to have the computer in front of them, engaging them in their own self-management and self-regulation of that. And it can be done with some humor and some show and tell and not just the lecturing. That's what I would take away with it, is I would try to do that because, yeah, you're right. I don't think, honestly, across the board that the ban it strategy is sustainable. And as I've blogged about recently this year too, There's accessibility. There's universal design. Some people, and I am one, have either physical or cognitive problems with handwriting. And then what, right? So that's our other issue. So I think that we're kind of inevitably marching to where you're at right now. Yeah.
Folks, we're having a hard time hearing
Oh.
the question that comes up.
Oh,
So
okay.
if you could repeat that, that would be great.
Right,
When
so
it
she's
comes up.
talking about how they're moving towards ebooks, right? Lots of good reasons to do that. And we want students to have the textbook in the class. Okay, now what? You just banned the technology, but students have to have it in front of them. So that's another situation. Yes.
And it's just like a follow-up to Mercedes' question.
Yeah.
Do you think the issue will be not just using the electronic device, but the fact that there is a rule saying not to use the electronic device that is indeed the actual distractor? Because I'm thinking as a faculty member, if
Yeah.
I'm teaching and I see a student with their cell phone, it doesn't bother me, but there is a rule, and
Right,
because I want to
right.
follow the rule, then it distracts me.
Great
And then
point,
I have to
yes.
tell the student, put your phone away, because that's part of the rule of the class.
Yeah.
So right there, it seems like it goes both ways.
Oh, well, yes. So it does, it goes both, yeah, it absolutely goes both ways. And actually that podcast, we were talking about a podcast at dinner last night. My biggest teaching failure, which I was invited to share for the 100th Teaching in Higher Ed podcast, actually gets to that issue, not around technology, but around my multitasking or trying to ineffectively during a class and it being a train wreck. So yeah, it's on us too. And again, if it doesn't mean we have to say anybody can do everything. It's fine and right to have parameters on what we do in a face-to-face class. But yeah, then if it is, especially if it's perceived as a more or less arbitrary rule, or even worse, it can be perceived as a, hey, this is about me and my ego, and I don't want you doing other stuff. That is totally counter to what we're trying to do in these classes. So opportunity, not an easy one, but an opportunity to get students engaged in the why. And after all, they're going to leave your class. They're going to leave all of our classes. And then they're going, how many of them are going to be remote workers, for example? And they're going to have to manage this stuff on their own. So, yeah.
I happen to have children who are millennials and post-millennials.
Ah.
And I've seen a difference in the way they act with their friend group. In my living room, the millennials will all have their
Yeah.
texting out and talk to each other.
Yeah.
The post-millennials don't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if the post-millennials will bring something else to the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope so. Yes, let's tactfully say yes. And you know, in these surveys, we didn't ask them about the perceived social acceptability of these things. Then I think you probably would see some real generational differences where, yeah, the younger people would look at it very, very differently. But that's just hypothetical. We were just saying, what do you actually do, how frequently, and then what beliefs do you hold about learning, memory, and attention?
And the millennials are still technology's new to them. The post-millennials, it's just life.
Yeah, it's just
So it may
breathing air.
help resolve itself a little.
Yeah.
Not
yeah.
totally, though.
I mean, it's interesting. My generation, it was television. There were the families where television was on during dinner and the families where it wasn't, and we all had to figure out, it wasn't this hard, but we had to figure out, where does TV fit in my life? It's structured to make you watch it until your eyeballs fall out, so you can't just do that. So where does it fit? Where is it appropriate? And how do we manage it as part of our daily life and workflow, so it works for us instead of against us? So that was the warm-up to where we are right now. All right, so student distraction, yes.
Well, I have kind of another aspect of this technology use in the classroom issue.
Yeah.
Isn't exactly distraction, but so just for context, I teach small classes, relatively upper level in biology. And we allowed the use of computers in the laboratories, so they're doing other exercises there, and the students were using them to cheat. And we found them that they were cheating. They were doing the exercises because someone had uploaded the information to Quizlet or one of the online sites you can learn about later. So all the answers to the sheets that we use every semester were there, and they were copying them off there. So we recognized that. We told them, you got to cut that out and things. And one student did not. And so we banned all use of computers in the laboratories. Unless they're doing something specifically, we've got computer-assisted equipment, except for that. And
So in the situation, and you're not saying like broadly, so talking about banning and computing all together in a particular setting, you've got a reason and you've got a justification. It's not just saying across the board, no computing ever, no having your phones out. There's a reason to do that in that situation. And it can work if it has to. And that's kind of honestly where I would like to see, and hopefully this debate that we're having in higher ed will evolve more towards, okay, very situation-specific bans and getting students more informed on their own about these types of issues. Yes?
the only other thing I can add about technology and distracting things in the classroom is that I always make a joke about it. I mean, I get around it by, again, small classes, but I had students in lab one time playing a game in class on their phone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know, there's this game called Plants versus Zombies. Well, these are plant classes. So I walked up to them and said, oh, playing a game, you know, you only are supposed to be playing Plants versus Zombies in this class. That's the only allowed game.
Yeah.
Things. And so, you know, everyone around him laughed and things, and he put away the phone.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, and to kind of acknowledge that this challenges all of it, and to take, it sounds like very much the mood that we were going for with Attention Matters, and hopefully we're effective. Yes?
I think the context is very important here. The context
Yeah.
of the discipline, the context of the number of students in a class, the context of the design of the class, whether it is
Yeah.
a lecture, whether it is a seminar or a combination of both. And in my seminars, I have had students use when we were doing some kind of research in class, then of course they could use it. But if we're set up to have this dialogue, then I think it is important. And it's not about me being the authority figure. In fact, it's about they being equally engaged. But on the other hand, one last thing I want to say about this, because I've done some research on this, is the situation of the teacher. That person is a subject as well. Should not be objectified, nor should students be objectified. And there's something about the pedagogical relationship where they are coming together, again, in this specific design, in this format. So if I'm setting up that way, and that is conveyed and discussed, this is how this class operates, then I do think to disregard that is actually not only a lack of attention engagement, but to me, there's an ethical component to that. Because we're here for each other. Just a thought.
So viewing it, so this is not just perhaps a life management aspect of, you know, contemporary existence, but an ethical one as well. I mean, we see it, texting and driving is definitely an ethical issue, and we talk about that in Attention Matters too, which is a little far afield, but we just felt it was too relevant and too important of a health issue, really, to put aside.
Wonderful, but I think context does come into play, and
Yeah.
these are actually existential issues and ethical issues.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. And I bet that many people, ethical and even existential approaches to this, and drawing students into that conversation, here again, I think you would probably be pleasantly surprised by actually engaging students with this. And straight across the board bans don't do that. They don't do that. You can have a very strict ban in a classroom, but it's not a matter of, oh, hey, it was the arbitrary rule I put in. Yeah. I love this topic because, you know, so much of us really think deeply about this. We have to.
So I love the approach from a pedagogical perspective, right?
Yeah.
And kind of positioning myself as part of the group and teaching people to, you know, that there is logic behind this and that we want to
Yeah.
respect one another as opposed to putting down a rule, right? And yet I have to ask the question, what happens when we get to the point that they don't care? They're completely apathetic. So just like drunk driving, we send that message all the time. They don't care, right? And I hate to say that, but there are many students who make the choice. They're like, yes, I understand that it does not allow me to learn. I understand that it is disrespectful, and yet I don't care.
Okay.
So what do we do? And I'm not saying we're there yet, but we might be. What
Let's
do we do
toss
when we
the-
get there?
Let's toss the box, because I think that is, what if we are truly to the point of, we led them to water, I know,
Right.
I don't care.
I think that what we're talking about is self-destructive behavior. in that case. So I don't think that that's something that can be fixed in the classroom. You can take them aside and talk with them, but otherwise you're talking, I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but it seems to me you're talking about a professional issue.
Yeah, you are. And I think perhaps to springboard off of that too, if it's self-destructive behavior, then we can perhaps differentiate between the choices that are harmful for your learning, and I'll do as much as I can to lead you towards the right choice. But at what point does it become harmful to other people's learning? And in a fully online environment, this is less relevant, but it is obviously highly relevant in a face-to-face environment. And that's yet another one of our interesting discussion themes that pops up, and we elicit from them too. What if it's not you? What if you're making the right choice and it's the person next to you that's watching The Bachelorette and it's distracting? So we have some feedback on that as well.
Yeah.
Catchbox.
We consider, we do that, we have that in the syllabus, is disruptive behavior in the classroom.
Yeah.
Because it's affecting the instructor and the classmates.
Yeah. And it's, here again, as a psychologist, this is just a real old psychologist trick, honestly, is you get them to say it, and it's not hard, rather than me saying it. You guys, oh, well, what do you think about it? Other people using laptops in classes, and I have yet to see very many of oh, I don't care, whatever. I don't care about this. You hear, do you know how much I am paying and how much my family is paying? Do you know the loans that I took out to be here? I really care about this. It's not supposed to be totally entertaining all the time. And then you get them, you say, okay, well, what do you do about it? And that's another kind of psychological technique, is to say, well, what do you think you'll do next time you're in that situation? And you have students kind of break down into the camp of, I'm going to go up to them and I'm going to tell them, put it away. And then you have the more non-confrontational types who say, you know what, I think I'm going to pick this seat in the classroom that's closer to the front. That's what I'm going to do. Or others say, I would talk to the professor, and after all, this is kind of their job, and just let them know. And all those are perfectly fine. Those are all perfectly good. The point is to get them thinking before they've been all the way through this course and been distracted, what am I going to do? And have them picking a strategy, and other students who are there endorsing them, not me, not the grown-up, but other students saying, yeah, I think that's a great idea. I'm really glad you'll do that. So those are some other nuances for how we mediate it when you are getting into that territory, because it's not always them. Yeah.
In the classroom. So, and that's a reason to invite, if you've got one or two terribly disruptive people that are just for at hell or high water are going to be this way in the class, you've got to protect the rest of the class.
Yeah. And students, you get them talking candidly, they're totally on that side. They will not oppose that. Even if they don't say it in that classroom setting, they're thinking it. Yes.
So, all of this, I'm thinking about memory, right, and distraction. Because it's easy to relate memory with learning.
Yeah.
What happens to memory when there is distraction? How does it interrupt that process?
Probably at the encoding or the memory formation stage. All right, but that's probably where this occurs.
Okay.
So even short disruptions to attention can alter or destroy how much, basically making a memory representation of that. Yeah.
That's the first thing that comes to my mind, right? I have to first form that image in my mind so that I can associate the concept.
Yeah.
And then therefore, be able to have an output of whatever I learn. So it's interesting because if the process is interrupted, then that image is hard to form it. It's kind of blurry.
Yeah. And you can't just kind of rewind the tape and put yourself
There's
back
no
there.
tape.
There's no tape. Exactly. And that's actually one of the big myths that Shabriz and Simon and their work have surveyed people on, and that we incorporate into our survey too. The idea that memory is like a tape recorder.
Yeah.
And we can all laugh and say, oh, we know it's not. But then sometimes we act as though it is. And it allows me to kind of be complacent or distracted and think, oh, well, I can kind of go back No, there's no go back. Memory is actively constructive, it's attentively constructed, and it's reconstructed over time too, which also makes it very different. So speaking of memory, great place to transition to an well, hands-on. Exercise. Now for this, you'll need some scratch paper. So I'll ask you to use an antiquated technology, pen and paper. Anything will do. You don't have to turn it in. But we're going to tap into your memory one more time. Fortunately, I'll be asking you to use your drawing ability to put down your recollection of something that is very, very familiar. So we'll see. This might be too easy for some of you. What I would like everybody to try to do is sketch out the front, and if you're feeling ambitious, the back of a US 1-cent coin. A penny. Draw a penny. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, you may do a euro. I have to say US has to be super specific for exactly that reason. Okay. Front and back if you think you can, yes. But at least tackle the front. All right. Some good. I like that. It fills the space well. Okay. All right. A man in a building. Okay. Very good. A man, a building, and a question mark. I love it. It's like a poem. Mm-hmm. I know. Cash is such a hassle. All right. Okay. So now that your wonderfully detailed and accurate drawings have been completed, or nearly so, you can feel free to ransack your pockets for an example if you'd like. And I have one up here too, in case you don't happen to have one on you. So let's see whether you were correct. Straight off of Wikipedia. Okay. Okay. So did we find some discrepancies, some inaccuracies, perhaps? So let's throw them out. What was different between your drawing from memory and reality of this thing that you have encountered thousands of times over your life? Yeah. Okay, so you had the right thing, wrong place. Okay, and how many people had something like that? Right thing, wrong place. Okay, so transmission. Okay, what else? Oh, okay. How many people had Lincoln facing the wrong way? Okay, usually about at least a third of people, sometimes half or more. It's literally a coin flip. Sorry, but yeah. Oh, you forgot Liberty. That's nailing him in the back of the neck. How many people put a hat on him? Just be honest. Anybody put a hat on him? This is something that I've seen people do. Got a little top hat. You forgot the beard. All right. Anything else? Anything you noticed as a discrepancy? Right thing, wrong place, missing things? Yeah.
Well, the old pennies and the newer pennies are different.
Yeah, they are.
Conflated them in weird ways.
Yeah. All right. So kind of mix and match the wrong things, wrong places. Mercedes drew a euro for us, so we'll just have to take it on face since I don't quite. Do you think my memory of a penny is bad? But if you check, you probably find some of the similar things. So this is a replication of a really classic experimental study in cognitive psychology by Nickerson and Adams. And they went through this exhaustively. They picked a penny, but this also plays out with other stimuli. It can be a phone pad. Auditory stimuli can experience this as well. I know this myself. I've had this demonstrated to me when the NPR station at my university, I mean, they play their pledge drive every year, now twice a year, and they're 523, 5628, and they repeat that number all day long. And then I finally have the pledge come on that I really want that thing, and I'm racing for the phone. I'm going, what is that number? Well, okay, the same principle. The repetition didn't help me. And they found, by the way, too, that this also holds up if you do it in multiple choice format. So they also presented participants with arrays of plausibly designed pennies. And even with that in front of them, people can't pick out the correct one. So even it's not an artifact of drawing, it's not an artifact of something about vision or something about coins. This seems to be an underlying kind of ongoing phenomenon in memory. So I'll give this away and let you know that this is actually one of the things that we have incorporated into Attention Matters. It works great online. Students can upload the pictures of their pennies that they drew, and it's a springboard for discussion for our students as well. So if you did this in your class and had your students try it, and we can all laugh and say, oh my gosh, we don't know what we're even looking at. We have no memory of this thing. So why is that? So what's the ensuing discussion? Why is it that you've seen a penny thousands of times and you don't know what it looks like? Because you haven't paid attention to it. Great. So yeah, in that Attention Matters thing, it's one thing for me to hold forth about the encoding and you have to do this, you have to do that. But boy, that sends it home. Did you ever really look at a penny? Possibly not. Right. What else? Yeah.
Well, but I think it's interesting because I have two younger daughters. They never carry cash.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they could draw a penny. Seriously, because everything they do is a transaction on their phone or on a car or something not cash.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they could actually draw a penny.
Yeah, they can. Another variation on this is to have people draw a bicycle, and you don't, when you try to actually start to break down all the pieces of a bike, you realize you don't actually remember those. But maybe we need to just have a sort of a bragging rights contest for who can come up with an appropriate stimulus that's more millennial friendly, but still gets this thing across. So yeah, that's going to start to be an issue. But I think for many of us, it's even the exposure is there and we still don't know. So what else? So we never focused really on a penny before. What else?
Well, the real use of a penny, as cash that you're going to pay, I don't need to know exactly what a penny looks like. All I need to know is a penny's copper and it's smaller than a quarter and it's not the size of a dime or a nickel. And I can pick it out and not, it's not important to know exactly what's on the penny.
Right, and whether Lincoln is wearing a hat or not is not material to your goals. So the need to know principle in memory, that goal focus, when we say, oh yeah, we remember things when they fit into our goals, that's the sort of concrete instantiation of that. You don't need to know what's on there. Maybe there's some situation in which you would need to know, and in that case, you'd probably encode and recall it a lot more efficiently. Yeah.
How about the value?
The value.
And also the connection that a certain item brings, you have with a certain situation, even if you are not seeing it, but the fact that it connects with you helps you to bring it out of your memory.
Right. I mean, how many of us know, and I know I'm in a room full of PhDs, so this is a dangerous question, but how many of us really know, why is the penny configured this way? Why is Lincoln facing this way? Why is he wearing that outfit? If I knew why, boy, I bet you the next time somebody put me through this exercise, I'd know. Right, so the context and the meaning. So all those big themes that memory theorists have been playing with for years tend to really come together in this one little exercise that comes out of a research study from 1979. And bonus, it does really work online. We will probably have to come up with a different example soon enough. Yeah.
I don't want to hear all this.
Also, something that he said triggered something that I realized that my kids cannot learn how to tell the time with the old-fashioned.
Oh yeah.
Because it's amazing how they make so many mistakes, even they study over and over. It's because they don't use it anymore.
They've seen it, but they haven't used it.
Yeah, and
Right.
they have to study how to tell the time, but they fail all the time with those things.
So that's perhaps another really relatable example we can bring to our millennial students. And, you know, contrast that to the folk beliefs that students have. That, well, it's in the textbook, or beliefs that we have, well, if there's points attached on some exam that's in 4 weeks, then it'll somehow get in there. When, in fact, what will make it stick possibly forever is factors like meaning, attention, actual value, not arbitrary points value. Those are the things that matter. So, yeah.
So what does it mean that they forgot to put the place of manufacture on?
Oh, yeah. The place of manufacture, on my examples, or the, yeah, it means that I pretty much did take that out of Wikipedia after sort of getting dizzy on all the different examples. But yes, and it is true that the different examples differ. But I think that basic idea still comes across. It's not in the minor details, or is it the new penny or the old penny that trips us up. We don't even know which way he's looking. So that's a good one. And if you use nothing else out of Attention Matters, she's got one.
I was just going to say, maybe to take it one step further,
Yeah.
to then obviously have them think about where we talked about the why,
why.
The why would be more impactful, but then to help them see why the why is going to be impactful in their world after graduation. So the why is what sells, the why is what influences, it's
Yeah.
not the what, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just saying, continuing those principles of adult learning and making sure that students know exactly how this is going to apply to them long term.
See, that's great. We can say very generally, oh, you know, the world's going to belong to lifelong learners, and we're going to have new skills. And that sort of, that can really wash over a person. But to say, all right, here's some very specific context which you're going to need later. And so this is going to be with you your whole life. If you get nothing else out of your university education, that ability to teach yourself things, aren't we always, you know, promoting that as the value that we're bringing? So that is something that's just the dialogue we should be having with students. So even outside of Attention Matters and the distraction, we've also looked at, and I've worked with some ways of making some of these things explicit to students. And this is also, you know, downloadable off of my website, and I'm happy to send you a copy anytime. I am no graphic artist by any means, but I sat down at one point in one of my a course that I was teaching to our first-year students on things like study strategies and managing your brain power, we called it. And I said, all right, let me just try to boil it down to 6 things. And you'll see variations of these 6 things on thelearningscientist.org. There's lots of different places to get this. But this is one quick hit take-home set of messages for how students can manage their own memories better. So that quizzing principle, knowing that they're more prone to rereading, that's their go-to. Play off of that, challenge them to quiz instead. The visualization, the structure, right? If I really understood what all the components of a penny meant and how they fit together, I'd remember. But and then our minds are not set up to just take in lots of undifferentiated information. If they did, that would not be very adaptive. We're made to take in structured, selective information selectively. Giving things meaning, especially self-relevance, right? We tell them to do that a lot in our courses. I think most of us do, but we don't always reveal the why. And if it's just something that's going to be inherently difficult to remember, like that one verb conjugation or the new vocabulary item, that's where something like mnemonics comes in. I mean, I think we associate mnemonics with memory strategies, and I think that's unfortunate because mnemonics tend to be limited. That's things like, oh, you know, what do you do for a sprain? Have we all seen that one? RICE, rest, ice, compression, elevation. It's just a little trick, a little shortcut. But that's introducing cues to hard to remember information. So last ditch, that's when you go to the little games with first letters and creating cues that will help you remember it. But the rest of it tends to be more substantive and more kind of action oriented, what you do with the information. So maybe that's something we should be sharing across disciplines and figuring out how do we work this into our courses. We even, I'll just share this with you just for a little bit of background. We've even tried teaching one interdisciplinary mini course online. This kind of lacks a home because we don't have the unit that it was part of was dissolved, and you know, lots of drama behind it. But we did even try to create a whole applied memory course. And that was a really good experience for me to say, okay, I'm going to come at this not from, oh, I'll teach you the history of memory theories and here's how this one worked and it led to that, but really more a how-to of how to use different memory strategies. So this is just our little course flyer to get people interested in that. So you can even do this as a freestanding I think we did it as a 3-credit course. We, instead of a textbook, we used this graphic, which might be familiar to you. It's from Moonwalking with Einstein. We used that as the core text in the course. It kills me it was not written by a psychologist. It was written by a journalist. But if you haven't read this one, he does get the science right, and it's got a fabulous underlying story having to do with memory championships and people who do memory competitions. And that's not something that is going to be useful or relevant per se to our students, but what you learn from how they do that can flow into all areas of life. And he also has a great TED Talk. It has spoilers for the book, so you kind of have to go with one or the other. But both of those are great resources to bring in either for ourselves or to directly share with students. So letting them know about how memory works and sharing the best we can with them. So. Up. Okay, so lastly, let's skip ahead to this. So before we move on to our application, I do want to once again refresh this idea of retrieval practice, right, and how we put that to work in the class. A lot of these things we've already brought up in here, but just a few plugs for, first of all, how are the assessments framed within the course? Are they framed as learning opportunities, or do you differentiate, hey, this is the chapter quiz that's for learning purposes, and here's the summative assessment, the big exam, or whatever it is that measures the learning? So what do students think about those assessments? And then it can really look like any number of these. This non-exhaustive list includes things like repeatable quizzes. So we've tried this in our Introduction to Psychology course. I have it in different versions in many of my courses, but essentially using the affordances of the technology to do something like put the whole test bank online, bring it into the learning management system, and then randomly generate a 10-question quiz that students can take as many times as they want. And I like the technique of counting the highest grade. And then you can pose to students, well, hey, what if you made 100 on this? Would you take it again? And Dawn's like, oh, well, it's no risk. Why would I do that? Oh, because it gives me more practice. So repeatable quizzes expressly framed as part of the, hey, let's get up to speed on the foundational information. Personalized quizzes, this is a word that, you know, is really sounds a lot more sophisticated than it is. This can be as simple as, hey, the quiz emphasizes stuff that you got wrong on an earlier attempt. So students have used flashcard decks like this since time immemorial, and it's a great strategy. And in fact, there's on my website there's a research project that's mentioned by James Pennebaker and colleagues UT Austin that really used this to some stunning effect. So they kind of pitched it as we have a high-tech quizzing platform, and we brought this into our Intro to Psychology course, and they actually replaced all of the high-stakes exams in the course with just these personalized quizzes that students took every day in this giant lecture class. And what was personalized about it was really just that every quiz included an item that you got wrong on some other earlier attempt. That was it. And if you've never gotten anything wrong, then you didn't have that part of it. But they found that this not only raised the grades in this one class that students do surprisingly poorly on, really, all over the country. It improved learning by other more objective measures, and this carried over from one semester of psychology into even other non-psychology courses. So students who had been exposed to this technique actually did better. They are not sure why. Obviously, it wasn't designed to be able to tell them that, but they hypothesized that it might be because students actually see this principle in action. They see it and they go, oh wow, yeah, this actually was very helpful to me as I went along incrementally. I can do this in my next class, even if it's not expressly built in by the instructor. So Quizlet, yes, it has its downsides, but the learning to go, the quiz yourself on the fly, that part of it I think is a great use of mobile technology. Different forms of gamification, different ways of giving incentives for the quizzes, or giving them that dynamic feel of games. We'll talk more about games tomorrow, but that's another way to go about it. And I'll just end by telling you about the way that I have started to do this and bring this into my face-to-face research methods class. So this is one where, yeah, there's a lot of conceptual information, and that's where we really want to be, but they've got to all have the terms and some concepts as well when they come in. So I've started kicking off the first class of each week. The students have their books in front of them, they have index cards, and they generate quiz questions. So they actually go through and, okay, give me 3 questions. And then I go through those, and for the next class meeting, I generate a quiz. I made it about 7 or 8 questions, and you get that quiz back in front of you. And do I go through, grade them, give you the answers? No, I do not. We take it like it's a real quiz, but I say, you know what, I'm not going to take it up because it's in the taking of it. That's what matters. Then they all get their books out, and you want to see some engaged students. Yeah, now it's time to know which answers were right, which answers were wrong, and why. And of course, if there's anything that they're stumped on, then we focus on that. But then they walk out the door with the quiz with them. So I tell them about the testing effect, but then I spend time on it every single day, making sure they get some mileage out of it. So that's just one way to actually flow this in. Yes, and box.
Well, I know this workshop is more geared towards online learning, but
Yeah.
As far as face-to-face learning, do you see any value in group quizzing? Does that help with memory at all? Because they're talking through the answers.
Okay, so group quizzing and talking through the answers. I think that you know, it's the talking through the answers. I don't think that necessarily the presence of just other people is all by itself going to do something special for memory. But to the extent that it gets students seeing things from different perspectives, yes, it can boost memory, but also that's going to then springboard into the thinking skills, because anytime you have students focusing on not just what's right, but why is it right, why is it wrong, that's when we get them doing the digging underneath. It's so hard to elicit. And it kind of reminds me of, I say I like it, and I actually mean it. The other thing that I do in this research methods class is I go way out on a limb with this. It's very unconventional, but what I do is, so we have the big, traditional exam on paper. I go and first I photocopy it because, I trust them and I love them, but not that much. And then at the next class period, we don't go over the test, right? I don't think anybody ever learned anything from that. What I do is I give them back a copy of their test that they filled out ungraded. I put them in groups, my choice, and I say, all right, here's a blank copy of this exam. You guys fill it out again. And I grade those 2, and I just set a kind of an arbitrary cutoff of 90%. Any points that your group earns over 90%, that gets added to all of your exam scores. And yeah, I mean, obviously that there's some points that get earned, and you would think, because they can use the internet, they can do anything but ask me. And what's typical is they'll get, it's rare that they will do perfectly, even in that setting, but they do pretty well. But more to the point, when you sit in on that, and all I'm doing is just sitting and kind of eavesdropping, that's where you hear those conversations of, well, I thought reliability really had more to do with this and validity was that. Or, I think this is the difference between how, the ethical codes evolved. And to hear them explaining to each other. And they do eventually have to make a decision. They have to go with one or the other. It's not, oh, you have your opinion, I have mine. We have to put something down. And so that really leads to a lot of, I believe, critical reflection. So another big fan of it. And yeah, so if we're going to test, then let's test right, test frequently, and do so in a way that they're going to get the most benefit out of as possible.
What did you add to what?
So I take the group exam score. So let's say you sit with your buddies at your table and you all fill this exam out again, and this time you get a 95. So everybody gets 5 points who is at that table. Everybody gets 5 points added to their exam when I go and grade the individual one. So yeah, and since I've done that, I've never had a dispute about a question because, oh, I thought it was so unclear. Somebody else at your table will say, no, it's not unclear. This is why it is this way. I've never had a question be disputed, and we uncover almost all of the major misconceptions. Do they do perfectly at the end of the semester? They do not, but they're engaged in that discussion that I really want them to have. So it takes a whole class period, but I really feel it's worth it. Yeah.
So I missed when you give them the blank test. When do you give them the blank test back? Is that after you hand?
That's immediate, the day after the exam. So if we took the exam on Tuesday, Thursday I roll in and I've got a copy of the one you filled out. I got the original locked up back in my office and a new blank copy of the same exam. And I put you in groups, and that's all we do for.
So do they see how they did on the exam while they're doing this
It's
exercise?
not graded. So they have their answers in front of them. So I know if I picked A and you picked B, or I said this or you said that, but they have no feedback from me at that point. But
do they know what the group score was?
Yes, they can. We usually don't spend a lot of time on that. If they really want to know what they get back, here's a breakdown. You got a 72%. Your group earned 3%.
No, I mean when they're doing the exercise.
Oh, when they're doing the exercise. No, they do not. They have to use their book, their material, each other.
So all they know is that they took the test, and now they're going to get a blank copy of the test, and they get to do it again as a group.
Yep. Yeah, and it's all up front. It's not a surprise, and we do that. We've tried doing it for the final exam, but it's a little too rushed to do that. Yep.
I do a couple of variants of things like that.
Yeah.
One is just give them an in-class exam and then let them do it again as a take-home collaboratively over the next week.
Yeah.
But in the final exam period, I give them a multiple choice exam. It's a design of mine where they can allocate points based on confidence, so they can split their bets. I collect the answers, I put them in groups, I have them do it again.
Yeah.
But what I have is a scoring method where I give them a group bonus that's based on, that's half of 50% of which is based on how much their score goes up from solo to team, and half is based on how much the average of their group member scores go up from solo to team.
Yeah.
So what I tell them is the only groups that don't win are the groups that don't help each other. It doesn't matter who helps and who gets helped. If everybody finds places to improve their answers, they all go up. Yeah. And it seems to work really well.
Yeah, so STEM education here has been really the leader, I think, in rethinking how tests work. And what a great way of changing that kind of very stereotypical, we're all graded on a curve, me versus you, atmosphere, as well as capitalizing on testing effect, capitalizing on what group learning can do, what it can elicit under the right circumstances. So I think the other moral of the story here is there's not one right way to do it. If you're concerned about social loafing or one group member dragging them down, there's different ways of configuring it. And students, they'll pick up on it. When they see, oh, okay, this is how it works, they're pretty good about figuring out the rules of your game and acting accordingly. And I love how you kind of backed up and framed it too, is the only teams that don't win are those that don't help each other. And yeah, that's a really useful take-home principle, even if you didn't quite get it about what percentage this or points that. That's the principle, and that's how it's set up. Then they get it.